Women of Power podcast is a platform for passionate and influential women who are catalysts for change, pioneers in their fields, the change makers, the trailblazers, performers and influencers, driven entrepreneurs and professionals. They play a vital role in driving economic growth and bridging the talent shortages across organizations of various scales. Building cause-based businesses to create positive impact in their communities and towards sustainable goals for the people, planet, and prosperity. In every industry, women are shattering barriers and strive to create a space where they can exhibit their achievements and motivate other women to unleash their limitless potential. We encourage collaboration, networking, and knowledge sharing among women. Let's inspire and learn from one another while sharing our valuable experiences. Thank you for joining us and listening to this episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of Women of Power. Women of Power podcast is a platform for passionate and influential women who are the catalysts of change, pioneers of their fields, the change makers, the trailblazers, the performers and the influencers, and driven entrepreneurs and professionals. Well, they play a vital role in driving economic growth and bridging talent shortages across organizations of various scales, building cause-based businesses to create positive impact in their communities and towards sustainable goals for the planet, people, planet, and, well, towards the sustainable goals for the people, planet, and prosperity. Okay. Women of Power is a dynamic platform that recognizes the incredible women as a driving force behind global economic growth. It is a platform that celebrates and empowers women of passion and power. As I always take extreme pleasure in introducing my guests, and I find the strength that women, despite their challenges, despite the backgrounds, either it's cultural or economic, where they come from, where they have arrived in each story, there is some uniqueness and they inspire us in many ways. Today, I am very proud to bring you another powerful woman. She's an investor, a serial entrepreneur, director, ESG influencer, and a blockchain expert. She has the accelerated growth of emerging companies and corporations applying her passion and innovation while supporting underdeserved markets. And I am so eager to hear more about it. As a partner of True North Impact, she brings her experiences from Silicon Valley to the investment firms that offers an ESG focused trading algorithm called TrueAlpha. Wow. As well as raising funds for companies in their growth phases. She also serves on a boards of Cambiatus and Commit Good. I think I got it okay. She was an advisor to Hard Yaka, a fintech family office in Silicon Valley, and the CEO of Yaka Labs, invested by Hard Yaka Ventures. A lot of impressive background, very powerful conversation I am hoping to have. And over the last several years, she has witnessed the evolution of new financial rails and organizational models using blockchain, resulting in economic, social, and political implications. My guest is Diana Adachi. Please help me welcome Diana. How are you?
Thank you. That's quite a bit there, Ritu. I love that. What you have indicated about women and what we have we can and continue to achieve as a group. So thank you very much for having me today.
Very welcome. I want to ask you, please tell us more about you. Who is Diana and how you got here where you are?
Well, I think I think when you had asked me to do this interview, it's an interesting time to be able to reflect back. We work in as we do in our careers, and so many different people come and go in your lives, and so many influences that occur because of it. But I really started to think back, and what really got me down the path of thinking about being an entrepreneur, because I was very young when I thought I want to be able to do that. I think what I liked the most was the idea of just that independence,
Hmm.
and being able to make my own decisions around what I was going to do and how I was going to do things. Um, I want to tell you quickly a little bit just about my background, and because I really believe that the whole entrepreneurship and the idea of service was really influenced through my family. I am of Japanese descent. I was born in Canada, and back in during World War II, the Japanese in Canada, as well as in the U.S., they were interned in these what they call internment camps, and essentially they were taken away from their homes with nothing more than a suitcase and clothes on their back, and they all had to be in these encampments, and they were there for the duration of World War II, so approximately 3 years. And in the U.S., the people there, the Japanese there, once the war was finished, was over, they were able to go back to their homes. In Canada, they were not allowed to go back. The provincial government, where they were interned in British Columbia on the west coast, the government basically took all of their possessions and put them in the camps, and they could not go back. They were basically forced to move eastwards, and so in the case of my family, that meant in the Toronto and the Montreal region cities. My grandfather, when he came to Canada, and that was in the early 1900s, he built up. He came nothing like all immigrants, with nothing but a shirt on his back. But this was my mother's father. He built a lot of different businesses, and was very, very successful. He owned a lot of properties. He owned different companies, etc. And when the war broke, as I said, all of that was taken away. So he ended up him and my mother's family ended up in these camps. And my mother was one of 4 children. My grandfather, he died during that time, and my grandmother was left with 4 children to take care of. My grandfather had um, the wherewithal, and he had a number of stocks that were investments in companies, and he gave those stocks to the RCMP, we call it, which is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So they were a type of enforcement in the West Coast, on the West Coast, and he, my grandfather was really a big believer in about communities, and he was very, very good to not only people that he worked for, but people outside of his businesses. And so these RCMP kept these stocks, and thank goodness for my grandmother, because when she came out of the camps with her 4 children and was forced to move out down east to Montreal, she had these stocks that was enough for her to buy 2 homes in a very lovely area of Montreal, one for her family and one for as a rooming house for other students. So that gave her the income she needed to support her family. So that was the story about my mom's family and about my grandfather. My father's side, his family was not the same. They were much more. They were poor. They were laborers in a pulp and paper company, pulp and paper mill company. My father, through those camps, that's how my parents met, was at the camp. So the good side or the story is that without what had happened, they wouldn't probably have met, and I wouldn't be here having this conversation with you. But my father, he was an interesting man, and I mentioned early on that the whole notion of service and talking about the underserved. He went on to become a high school teacher, and largely he taught students, young men, all about auto mechanics. And most of those students came from immigrant families who were not really big on, a lot of them were not really big, the parents weren't really big on education. They were much more interested in their kids working. The boys, young boys, teenage boys, they get into trouble. I don't care where they are. They invariably, there's issues, and their parents are working. And my father ended up in a lot of ways becoming their counselor, their mediator, going to talk to their parents, trying to help them solve their problems, etc. And he touched a lot of lives, and not only his students, and there were just hundreds upon hundreds, but also the community that we lived in, and what he did for us, creating a number of specifically around a baseball league for young boys, so that he always felt that if kids were engaged in activity, they were less likely to get into trouble. So just a real community person, and a real influencer. So that, I think, there's two sides of my family. Both had something very meaningful and strong for the community, and I think that all of those had influenced, in some way influenced my choices and decisions as I went on into work. I was fortunate enough when I came out of university. I had an opportunity to work at IBM, and that's what really opened my eyes to technology. And when I went to work for them, this was at a time when personal computing started to come into, and IBM just announced their personal computers. And so it was a lot of fun, because that was it was just all kinds of things were going on, lots of activity, this whole new type of computing. Personal computing was such a big thing. And, as it is today, and here we are talking on these personal computers. It was such a great learning experience, but it was a learning experience during a very fun time. So I was working for this big institution. You learned a lot about business, and you learned a lot about client relationships, and it was just great training. And so that was for me, because when I went to university, I was studying science, chemistry, biochemistry, I didn't do any computer science. So when I went to IBM, they said, that's okay. There are people here from all different backgrounds, and, so that was I didn't do anything related to science. And once I was working for IBM, it was kind of, it was like the bug of, here's technology, and this is what it was, just exciting. So that was a big opportunity for me. When I left IBM, and this is a few years later, I was a co-founder of two different businesses. And this is really what got me into the whole area of financial technology, so
I,
fintech.
I wanted to explore more on that. It's very hard to find women in both, successful women in both finance and tech together. So I want to hear more.
Well, what was interesting, I mean, I mentioned I had, we had two businesses. One business, and we had it for a few years, is there was a lot of, at that time, a lot of companies in Silicon Valley who were creating all different types of either software or components for the personal computing. Our computers today, the laptops today, they have all of this embedded chips and technology that when personal computing first came out, they didn't have any of that. It was really, if you looked inside any of those computers, there was virtually not a whole lot of anything. So a lot of companies created different add-ons to put in the computer. So like an accelerator board or a hard drive or a graphics card or whatever. And these are all enhancements to make the computer run better. So these companies existed in Silicon Valley. They didn't have representation in Canada. And so my partner and I, we became the representative for a lot of these companies. And these were big names like even Intel. And so we did quite well. And but that was like a very short window, like 3 years, 3 or 4 years. Because then computers start getting better. Components were, become integral into the actual computer itself. So these companies, they were no longer relevant. But what was changing, and this was, heading into the early 90s, was multimedia. And with multimedia, you started to see content being created, and companies like AOL, America Online, appeared, and they basically had different, they called them channels, but they were specific content for depending on what your interests were. And AOL Canada had this whole computing and games area. And my partner and I became the computing and games area for AOL in terms of content, because we had created content specifically for family computing. And this is where the fintech comes in. Because we had access to all of these different companies who had products that, and largely it was software products, that we were able to sell that. But what I started to find is for us to actually take payments online, and this was in the early 90s, it was very difficult. You really couldn't take, because we didn't have the ability to take a credit card or any form of payment. And so this started me into the whole path of payment technologies, because I became very curious about, about payments in general. And over a period of time, I got deeper into this area. And one of the companies that I was working with was a national telco in Canada. And telcos, like the banks, they're just networks. They're networks of, telecom is about voice. Banks were moving money around. So this telco wanted to get into the payments area. And one of the things that they were looking at, and what I was working with the team on, was creating a card that was an ability to store cash, store value, was able to be used in a form of tap and pay, to be able to be used. So think about, in your wallet at the time, you may have had a transit card, or you might have had a loyalty card for this coffee shop, or you might have had, a payment card for. So there are all these different cards, and we were looking at putting it all in one and just being able to tap and pay and go. Which today, I mean, that's what everybody does, but we're talking about almost 30 years ago.
Wow.
So we were developing all of this. And one of the things that happened as I was working with, we worked with what we call closed campuses. So this would be, so you get off the transit, whatever, the train, the bus, whatever, and right there might be, a coffee shop, it might be a newsstand, it might be a cleaners, whatever. So there are always these, a lot of these different retail outlets that were associated in the transit areas. One of the areas, and that's what we call those campuses, one of them was a university campus.
Mhm.
And, university students, it became clear to me about their situation is very different. Most of them, were still working with just cash. They didn't have any credit card because
Bank
because
account.
they're
Yeah.
because they're underbanked. And so that, working through that and working through what I considered at that point in time, and still is, it's, the underbanked, underserved. I started to look around and really got interested in that segment because for you and I, we have, you know, access to anything and everything because we do have a bank account, because we do have these cards. And that's not the case in the U.S. alone. There's tens of millions that are what I consider underbanked. And when you think about what happened during the pandemic, a lot of merchants did not take, as a matter of fact, most merchants didn't take cash. But there was that whole worry about touching money,
Touching
and they were just
anything.
basically saying tap and pay, right? So think about people who couldn't tap and pay because they didn't have those cards, like today even. So going back, a couple of decades and starting to work in this area and realizing, there's a whole group of people who need different types of payments that weren't necessarily always controlled by the banks. In Silicon Valley, it was interesting because there was a few different applications that I saw, and having people like even on the transit system, and how they came up with, a company that came up with, I think it was called Pay Near Me, but they would go and pay cash because they couldn't pay cash in a bus. They go to, let's say, a 7-Eleven or a convenience store and pay there, and then get a ticket or whatever to be able to, or a card to get onto a bus. So there's so many of these different types of innovations at the time, and so that's something that really captured my interest and got me very into looking at different types of applications. Um, One of the companies, so as I told you, I am Canadian and living in Toronto. I ended up working for and was hired by a company who really wanted to move and become more of a payments company. And one of their clients, their major clients, was Visa,
Mhm.
and which is in Silicon Valley in Foster City. Um, and so I was hired on as their sales and marketing lead, and within a year became their president. And they relocated my family to Silicon Valley. So that's and that was probably one of the biggest challenges for me and my family.
Mhm.
I was, you come to, it's one thing to move homes, but now you're moving countries, Canada to the US, and US is not. We're very different countries. Speak the same language, but we're very different countries. Move to a new country, move homes, move schools for the kids. You're having to find all your professional services, your doctors, etc. Like everything is new, and friends. We didn't know any. We didn't know anyone. We didn't have any family down there. So new, right across the board, and that was really, really tough. And you didn't really realize until you're in that position, like what it means to have your friends and family around you. You think you can do everything, but really, it's about a community. that really helps build, helps you with your family, helps you with everything. And
Sense of
you know,
belonging. With the community, you have sense of belonging.
you do, and I totally understand. That. I think that there's lots of different. Doesn't matter what religion you are. There's lots and lots of different churches, or sorry, workplaces of worship. And I can understand why that is, because Americans, they do move a lot around a lot. But if they belong to a particular religious organization, regardless, there is always a community instantly. And we weren't quite as we were not quite into one particular religion, or were religious to any particular institution. So it was a real, as I said, a real challenge trying to find who are the people who are who are your friends. And and for me at the same time, I was because I was the president of this company, I was traveling 4 or 5 times a year, basically around the world, because we had offices not only in California, we had offices in Singapore, in India. We had a huge, most of our workforce is in India. We had offices in the UK, in the US. So I was going to all these different locations once a quarter, because we had our board meetings, etc. And so that amount of travel, being in a new city, my family didn't have me there. Um, it was tiring. It was tough. My body and my mind never seemed to connect at the right time, because I didn't know which city I was in. That's how it felt. And I think about it today, Ritu, and I don't know. I don't know how I was survived all that. It was a lot, and it was a lot for them. And but again, I'm very thankful and very grateful for the family I do have. My kids and my husband, they're incredibly supportive, and we managed to survive that. And I only worked with this company for about 4 years, but that was it was a long 4 years, and it was a tough slog. Um, but during when I was one of my trips, when I went to India, I had an opportunity to one of our work associates took me to Darby. I don't know if you know about that slum that's in Slumdog Millionaire, the movie. Darby was the slum that was shown in the movie, and I had an opportunity to go there with a tour guide and one other person, and it was such I think it was a real it was a real eye opener, but more importantly, it really gave me faith in humanity and people, because walking around and seeing the community. So this is, I believe, about 2 million people, and people were employed they were running their own little business, whether it was recycling soap, or corrugated boxes, or selling vegetables, or whatever. And each of these businesses would be helping another business. That particular person that was selling soap, that was needed for another business. And to be with these this community, and there wasn't anybody looking for a handout. They were all proud of what they were doing. And I often, as I was walking around in awe, thinking, here's a community. There was no government intervention. They were just doing it for themselves. Their kids were going to school. The kids were wearing uniforms. So they were taking care of themselves, working for a better life. And I often think that, you know, that should be replicated other places. The ability to have, to give people a way to be productive for themselves, to have a life where they can have their children educated, put food on the table, have housing, etc. All of that. That was, really a wonderful trip and a wonderful experience. And so that always lived with me. And I think about, again, these underserved communities. And here's one that was just doing just wonderfully. So
Yeah,
so
our
that was
experiences transform us in many, many ways. And as I hear your story, what your grandparents went through to your own personal experiences, I look at when I entered tech sector as a technologist myself, turn of the century, just before Y2K. I had worked on those large machines on DOS computers myself. And here we are in age of AI and as I look into and hear visionaries, there's a lot more we will see within next few years. But what I wanted to just kind of bring attention for our audience, um, my experience, your experiences, and most of people, unless they are in their 20s, have seen in the last 30 years how you talked about the payment systems have changed, the technology has transformed. And I'm not trying to undermine the growth of any industry. Well, I think personally, I strongly believe that technology is the backbone of any industry for its growth. So in your dentist office, you take away all the technology. What's left is you'll find it in Smithsonian, right? Just to put it in that way. So that's
yeah,
how far we have come. You walk into a hospital, you walk into a bank, you go, there is unbelievable amount of technology. You swipe your badge, you don't know how much wiring and things are inside the wires and the floors and the ceilings and stuff. With swiping your card, so much is connected with that. That's amazing world that we're living in. With an instant and the small device in the palm of our hands, we connect with people around the world, right?
yes,
I remember growing up with my father subscribing 8 or 9 newspapers daily basis. And now, I mean, it's funny that we think about those days. The newspapers are obsolete a day after. But right now, we have instant news. But it's overload of information. The information we have, there's no transformation. It's more confusion. So when we look at technology is also a double-edged sword at the same time. But for most part of what technology has brought in into any industry, either a space research to financial sector, medical sector, agriculture sector, everywhere, for the most part, technology has brought in a lot of growth. With that, as you had mentioned, the people underbanked, you talk about underbanked, unbanked people, how to look at the needs for those communities to be assimilated in the society and be productive citizen of the society, be proud citizen of the society, not a burden on the society. So all these are very, um, um, positive way to look at how technology can help them, right? You mentioned COVID, businesses didn't want to touch money. I mean, we all have a lot of stories around COVID that we came across. Schooling. I came across during those days during lockdown, a company had developed a very special software for children with disabilities and blind children to teaching them with use of the technologies, etc. It was very innovative. So I think specifically with your background, you combined the need of the day with the technology and brought in a lot of new ways of utilizing your knowledge, your curiosity, and delivering something. That's very inspirational,
Thank you. Thank
right?
you.
We
Well,
I just want to say that. So, for our listeners, for especially young women, I always say, like I talk about in my book, the younger generation of women, you are standing on the strong shoulders of the giants, the trailblazer women. Acknowledge them. So, people like you are those giants uh, that he have. Either you are the trailblazers. And, so that's very inspirational that despite your family had gone through during Second World War. So we don't hold our past hostage for our present and future. We still are resilient race, resilient human beings, and that's what I like to talk about so much. That regardless of the challenges will come, they're different for different people, for different generations, but we need to rise against those challenges.
I totally agree with you. And I like to say one thing about wanna, one of the things that I've learned along the way, and I mentioned that I was very much involved in blockchain, and I will talk about that in a minute. But I do want to say that while I believe and I agree with you, we've been very fortunate that technology has in all sectors has helped or improved situations. I do believe that it's really not just about the technology. It's really about, and this is where when you talk about the next generation, what I hope that they understand, what I hope that they uh, give more credence to is it's not really just the technology. It's really about the will of society. It's the will of the people. And they understand how, because a lot of the problems today that society faces, there's different countries, lots of countries who, look, think about the continent of Africa, which is growing at, a substantial rate. And there they have so much in the way of resources and so much in the way of capabilities. And yet, so many of the people, live in such horrible, very, very impoverished and in war-torn areas. And so why is that? Why can that not all be? I mean, they have just a lot of, as I said, a lot of incredible resources. So I think about, the and it is a double-edged sword with technology, but I think really more importantly is we need to stand back and think about, and this really got me thinking really within the blockchain technology,
Mhm.
because it is what the people call it. Say creates a trustless state, meaning you don't have to worry about trust, and it really um, what excited me really about Bitcoin in particular, not all the other cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin, is the ability to move money or value from one person to another anywhere in the world. And there was no intervention per se, no bank per se. The thing that I think about these technologies is that, again, my question is, it's not so much that the technology, what it can do, and it blockchain. When I worked in it, and I was a global lead for Accenture in 2017. I was talking to a lot of major corporations like Exxon, like Pfizer, like Apple, um, governments, banks. A lot of them are just, when you talked, when I was speaking about it, either when I looked in the whites of their eyes, they either got it and sort of spark of how they could use it. But a lot of times they would be looking at people and there was this fear factor. And the fear factor was, oh my God, this is going to eliminate a lot of work, a lot of jobs. This is going to eliminate back offices because you now have this technology. And let me just explain this really, really briefly for your audience.
I want
That
to ask a question before you get into the answer because I was extremely curious about this, with your outstanding background. So my question is around that is that with the underprivileged, underbanked, unbanked society, would these types of technologies have a positive outcome? If you
Yeah.
can incorporate that in your answer. So sorry to interrupt you, but this is
No,
what
no, no, no. Because
that
I want to talk, and I am going to talk about a couple of companies that I've worked with and how that makes a difference. So just quickly, blockchain. It's a type of database. It's very unique, and I had mentioned about it being trustless. The attributes of this particular database is that the information, the transaction that gets recorded, it is transparent to everybody. That transaction does not get recorded unless there is what they call a consensus, that there is agreement that that transaction occurred. That transaction is permanent. You can't edit it in any way. It's encrypted, again, for security reasons. And the data is not centralized. It's not one organization that owns it. It is what they call decentralized. So there are all these attributes of what blockchain has that gives it its strength. So as a quick example, you think about, let's say, the auto industry and the car manufacturing. And when I was explaining this to people, I have the car that I was driving. I was driving a Lexus, and I got this letter from the dealer saying, "Oh, your car. There's a problem with the brakes,
Mhm.
and we have a fix, but we don't know when we'll have the fix." And I'm reading this letter saying, "This is my brakes, and I have a problem, and you can't tell me when I'm going to get that problem fixed." And I called my dealer. I said, "This is crazy." They had no idea when those parts were going to arrive to fix the problem. So now think about blockchain. Now you have all these different manufacturers who have all these different parts. It is now recorded where these parts are. And so that you would know when you're trying to put something together, like a brake or whatever is required, that you would know where these components are because it's logged in this database. The challenge today in a lot of these databases, because they're all different formats or whatever, and people are, back offices trying to um, uh, figure out the authenticate all this information, and then having to audit and make sure that the information is correct, etc. So there's all this challenges in order for these companies to be able to determine what components are where and what warehouse, etc. So then once the car manufacturer actually is able to make a car, it goes to a distributor that ends up going to a dealer that ends up going to a consumer who may sell it back to the dealer in a secondhand market, and then a new consumer owns it. All those transactions again can be on a blockchain, and it can all be assigned by the VIN number. Well, that VIN number can if that car got into any problems or there's any issues with it, whether it's, let's say, it got into an accident or whatever, the insurance company, the repairman, all of the people that are involved can easily check the records and understand the information. So, that just the life cycle of any part, that's just one small product. There's just many. And, all these different challenges because people have these
So
arcane.
there
Uh,
is a visibility through the start to end.
Correct. And it's the information that you can trust. So that's why I talked about trustless. So where I want to get to, so that's really the technology. There's, it can be used as there's applicability. The big application for a lot of those industries is in supply chain. And you and I won't know that it's being used because it's something in the background. It's infrastructure. Um, but that has very much real merit. What really did interest me, and as I said at the beginning, was about Bitcoin. And again, I differentiate between Bitcoin and a lot of the other cryptocurrencies that are out there, is that this is a store of value. And I also want to tie in the whole point about the will and the change that we take. When I think about Bitcoin, and we think about what money is, money is a store of value, and Bitcoin is a digital form of value. It's what they call liquid gold, but it stores value and allows for you to exchange value between people. When I talk about the underserved communities, I had the opportunity to sit on two different companies and their boards. One was serving the Latin America, so Costa Rica and Brazil. And there are communities there where there really isn't a lot of fiat currency flowing. So fiat currency, just regular cash money in that particular country for different reasons. And without cash, when you think about it, how do you sell your goods? How do you determine that my 2 apples are worth your 3 pears? How do I get compensated? How do I, sell my services? So one of the companies, what they did is they created this, what they call social currency, but it is a digital currency.
Mm-hmm.
And that enabled that community, and what they have their sets of rules and governance behind that in order for them to be able to trade and be able to use that currency within the community. And this, by the way, isn't new. I mean, there is I mean, back in the 30s or 40s, Switzerland, there was a type of currency called WER, W-E-R, and it was created for similar kinds of circumstances, and I believe it's still in existence.
Barter trade system in the past, in old days, that you trade goods, whatever you had grown or had the animals or cattle and services and things like that. Yes, interesting. Yes, how do we apply those kinds of strategies in our today's life?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I can go on and talk a lot about this, but that was, to me, that there's so much applicability, and even today.
Social currency you talk about. So is it digital social currency?
Correct. That's
Yes,
when we talk social. It's just it's a digital currency. It's a digital currency of
and that is specifically that you're talking about is the underserved communities.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct. Because you and I, we don't have to worry about this. That's why it's hard for when I talk about this to people who are in North America, because they're like, well, we do have a currency, and we're very lucky it's not volatile. Think of Argentina. Argentina, people living there, their currency, what today would have bought them. We wake up, they go to the store, would buy them a bag of groceries. By the end of the evening, that bag of groceries is maybe, a piece of fruit. I mean, their dollar was so volatile. And these are things that, a lot of us don't experience, so we don't think about this. But if you're in those situations, or think about today, you're in a country where you're at war. You're trying to leave and go somewhere else. You're leaving with just your shirt on your back. You can't take cash because you will be robbed. So how are you going to do this? How are you going to, these are people that have means, and they're going to another country. with their family. How can you go and have safe passage and be able to have money when you arrive somewhere else? It's all of these sorts of things that we, again, we are lucky that we have not had to face that. But there are a lot of people out there that have.
I agree.
And
In many situations, yes, around the world, well, either it's sad, or especially in war zones, and so the families as refugees they go or say that you're not taking anything with you,
no,
just
no.
your torn apart lives, or that you're just carrying with you. Yes, and when it comes to okay, currency, so to speak. Or, yes, when you talk about it, there are so many variables. There are so many nuances that most people, like, say, in North America, we haven't experienced that, fortunately. So it's very hard for people to kind of imagine things.
To comprehend that, yes, to understand that, yeah. And in the news media, news outlets that you talk about, there is a lot that's misinformation about what some of this is. There's a lot of, I have to say, there are a lot of bad actors in cryptocurrency for certain, no doubt, and bad actors in how they've used Bitcoin. But I have to tell you that there are a lot of bad actors in how they've used, there's lots of money laundering that goes on in our banking system.
What would you advise people who don't have much information what blockchain is or cryptocurrency or Bitcoin is? They are not as educated or informed about these things, not really technical, but are looking out for themselves and for their future or their financial futures. So, in a very simple way, what would you say to them?
So, are you talking about people who don't have access to, like, are you talking about people that are on the underserved? Or are you talking about people who are just
Not
everyday people who,
knowledgeable, people who are not knowledgeable about the blockchain
yes,
and
yeah.
or Bitcoin or cryptos, but they're concerned about their financial future. Is that something that they should learn about or find out more, or is there some?
Yeah, I will. From to be honest, I would definitely have them learn, get, and there is a lot of information out there on this,
Mhm.
and lots of tools out there that they can use and test. Um, I would say, it's like anything when you start to think about investing and putting money aside, etc. You really do need to get with credible sources to understand where and how to use this. No matter what, I even read and people talk about this. They all say, and there's risk, and there is, no question. But there's also, you know, I have been accumulating cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin, for almost 10 years now. But I've been at it for a while, and I started into it early on, not so much to amass wealth, but to understand it. This is an area that I'm very interested and passionate in, and I needed to understand how it works. It got me to understand a lot more about bank systems. It got me to understand what money is. It got for me to understand really the political implications around all of this.
Mhm.
And that's a whole another story that you
Maybe
have to.
I'll have this conversation at another episode, but this is all very interesting, and I just want to make sure that we don't miss out on a important message for our audience. Is that we talk about women in leadership. You have an incredible experience, lifetime experience, and your your take on where women are positioning themselves on leadership roles.
I think women, they're. I think a lot of women are natural born leaders. They just don't know that. And I think my leadership style has always been one of more of a servant leader. where I do whatever I can to help people that work with me, to help them rise up, be successful, work together. People like to come and help each other and be successful, and be put in a situation of being successful. They're not, and particularly the Gen Z, it's not so much about money. It's really for them, it's about, being cared for and being a contributor and having a good balanced life. The life that I had when I was traveling and doing all that, Gen Zs today won't do that. It's they see life very, very differently. But what I will say to women who are interested in leadership is leadership starts from within. You lead yourself, and you have, for me, I've always had these three guidelines, and my guidelines are grace, humility, and integrity. And in my decisions, they're often influenced by that. And I think you need to have, as a person, you need to have some, your own, what's important to you, and know what's important to you. Therefore, you can move forward in a very authentic way. That is, I think, again, women, they're intuitive, they're compassionate, as you said, they have the empathy. They tend to be, to me, a lot more authentic. And those are, to me, the signs of, as a leader, you're willing to make mistakes. You have the humility to know that and acknowledge that. You're kind to not only to your people, but you're kind to yourself. And I think women are the hardest on themselves. But
Yes.
being compassionate to yourself is really, really important. And then having integrity. How many people have we met and you think, you're just lying? That is just BS. And, to me, that once you cross that line, you've lost them. So I just think that women have a great opportunity. I hope we see more of it. We are seeing a lot of it now. Boardrooms still need more women in it. Our government needs more leaders. It's getting better than it was, but we have a long way to go.
Yes.
And we have the ability to. So anyway, that's what I hope people, young women think about. We all have our ups and downs in our journeys, but those ups and those downs in particular help push us forward in a good way.
Absolutely. And I as I see, in front of our experiences, in our own experiences and raising our kids, we have seen a lot of difference in the younger generation, how the gender gaps from my parents' generation to our generation to younger generation, things have changed. Women have come a long way. There's a lot more work needs to be done, but I want to add to that is we're part of a collaborative society. Competition is okay as long as it's positive, but when competition becomes destructive, that's not competition. So I strive for collaboration, right?
Right.
So, a collaborative society always wins. We come together. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts, your story, your successes, your growth so much. And I hope that our audience take away from your journey. And to our audience, please reach out to us. There are links. And can they reach out to you if they have any questions? Okay.
Certainly.
We'll be sharing those links to connect with you. And I really appreciate you taking time to meet with me and share your stories. And for our audience, well, thank you for listening. And until next time, I am host Ritu Chopra.
Thanks. Thank you, Ritu.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that information our guest has shared is helpful and you are taking away valuable tips and knowledge. We are committed to supporting women and building cause-driven businesses that create positive impact in their communities. Join us in the movement for change. Take action now and be part of Let's Come Together movement. Together, we can recognize, celebrate, and empower women who are making a difference in today's economy. Connect with passionate and powerful women, collaborate on cause-driven businesses, and build a better future for our